We all know about the steroid era, the period in the 1990s and 2000s where performance-enhancing drugs were used by many players, where home runs and hitting in general were at an all-time high. Fairly straightforward, and I don't think I need to explain it any further. The idea of hitting being at an all-time great for several years gave me an interesting thought. During a decade-long period of historic hitting where seemingly everyone was crushing the ball, who was the worst out there? AKA the worst hitter of the steroid era. Defining the years of the steroid era is a bit of a gray area. One ESPN article states it was from 1994 to 2004, while one from Bleacher Report claims it started in 1998, and still others would say the steroid era began in the late 1980s with Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire. Unlike universally agreed upon time periods like the dead ball era or integration era, there is no definite answer for what the steroid era was. Given that, when finding the worst hitter of the steroid era, I'll be looking at players active in a 15-year stretch from 1990 to 2004. Why those years? 1990 seems like a solid middle ground for the late 80s and mid-90s, and 2004 was the first year Major League Baseball implemented penalties for players who failed drug tests. Plus, it's my video, I'll choose the years I want. 15 years also seems like a long enough time frame to accumulate playing time, because as always, we need a minimum threshold for plate appearances. Sure, it's fun to say how former outfielder Keith Hughes had a negative 100 adjusted OPS in the steroid era, but his 13 plate appearances from that time frame are basically nothing. By the way, I cannot believe there is footage of Keith Hughes, but that's beside the point. I'd say 10 full seasons is a generous amount of playing time, and since 502 plate appearances is the minimum threshold for a qualified season, that would equal 5,020 plate appearances. Let's round that down to 5,000. So, from 1990 to 2004, there were 122 players who came to the plate at least 5,000 times. Who was the worst of that group? That would be former shortstop Rey Sanchez. Who exactly was this player? Just how bad was he offensively? And why did he play professional baseball for so long? Rey Sanchez was a shortstop who played in Major League Baseball from 1991 to 2005. He played for 9 teams, but spent the most time with the Chicago Cubs. In his career, he came to the plate over 5,200 times, slashing .272 with a .308 on base and .334 slugging for 648 OPS and 69 adjusted OPS. He has over 1,300 hits, over 50 stolen bases, nearly 550 runs, and nearly 400 RBIs. A decent contact hitter, his lifetime average and hits total aren't bad, but that's about all he could do with the bat, as evidenced by his low on-base percentage, slugging percentage, and other counting stats that we'll get to in a moment. But before that, I want to preface everything by saying Rey Sanchez wasn't just the worst hitter of the steroid era, he's one of the worst hitters in the history of Major League Baseball. First, how did he compare to other hitters during the steroid era? As previously mentioned, Sanchez is one of 122 players to have at least 5,000 plate appearances from 1990 to 2004. Of that group, he's dead last in OPS, adjusted OPS, home runs, extra base hits, total bases, runs, but don't worry, he's only second to last in RBIs. I'm particularly fond of his home run total, as Sanchez hit a grand total of 15 home runs, which happens to be less than half of the second fewest amount. To put that home run total in perspective, there were over 100 hitters during the steroid era to hit at least 15 home runs with fewer than 1,000 plate appearances. To compare Sanchez to another player, Mike Hampton had fewer than 750 plate appearances during this time frame and was 1 home run shy of tying Sanchez's mark. Mike Hampton, for those unaware, was a starting pitcher. A player doesn't need to hit many home runs to be great, but of course, Sanchez didn't just not hit many home runs, he was at the bottom in every offensive category. Some of his single season career highs in several notable statistics include 3 home runs, a 698 OPS, an 85 adjusted OPS, 56 RBIs, 68 runs, and 28 walks. To put it simply, He couldn't clobber the ball or get on base well, and the few times he did get on base, he wasn't a real threat on the base paths, as the most bases he stole in a season was 11. To pivot away from the steroid era for a moment, let's compare Rey Sanchez to players all time. Through 2023, there have been exactly 1,052 players with at least 5,000 career plate appearances. Of that group of over 1,000 players, Sanchez is within the bottom 13 in adjusted OPS, bottom 25 in extra base hits, and bottom 40 in home runs, RBIs, and total bases. Furthermore, if we look at 334 players with 5,000 or more plate appearances since Sanchez's debut season in 1991, he has the second lowest OPS, second lowest adjusted OPS, the fewest amount of home runs and extra base hits, and is in the bottom 10 for runs, RBIs, and total bases. Undoubtedly one of the worst hitters of all time with that many plate appearances, and arguably the worst hitter since his major league debut. With everything I've said so far, there's still one glaring question that needs to be addressed. Despite being one of the worst hitters of all time, and the worst hitter of the steroid era, how did he last 15 seasons in Major League Baseball? To put it simply, Rey Sanchez was pretty good. Not with the bat, of course, but with the glove. Rey Sanchez might be one of the worst hitters ever, but he's simultaneously one of the best defensive shortstops of all time. One major statistic I've yet to mention so far in this video is WAR. What was Rey Sanchez's career WAR, you're wondering? 20.6. On the surface, 20.6 doesn't sound significant in any way, as it's just good but not great. However, for someone that was as bad of a hitter Sanchez was, 20.6 was actually fantastic. First off, while Sanchez ranked last in offensive categories among that group of 122 players mentioned earlier, he ranks 89th in WAR. Not terrific placement, but certainly much better than 122nd. While he only ranks 89th in WAR, Sanchez ranks 2nd in D-WAR. During the steroid era, only Hall of Famer Ivan Rodriguez, one of the greatest catchers of all time, has more D-WAR. He has a mark of 23.2 in comparison to Sanchez's 21.1. Rodriguez also only managed that slightly higher amount despite having nearly 2,000 more plate appearances and games played. When looking at all players in MLB history, Sanchez's career D-WAR ranks as the 49th highest, the 32nd highest among shortstops, and among all players since his debut season, it ranks 9th highest. It isn't just D-WAR that Sanchez excelled at, as there are multiple other traditional and advanced fielding statistics he ranks high in. Sanchez also ranks in the top 10 all-time for shortstops in total zone runs, range factor per 9 innings, and fielding percentage. If you're unfamiliar with the specific advanced stats, they're just fancy ways to say he was a terrific fielder at his position. Legitimately one of the greatest fielders of all time, and arguably the best during his time in Major League Baseball. During a period in baseball where home runs and hitting was at an all-time high, Rey Sanchez has the distinction of being the worst hitter in the league. However, while his moments with the bat are forgettable, he was still a valuable player, being among the best of his peers in defense and among the best of all time. The worst hitter of the steroid era was pretty good.